بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وخاتم النبيين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بالإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your brother Abu Abdullah Abdul-Lateef from Abdul-Lateef.com as well as Arabic Virtual Academy, and I'm welcoming you to this episode of Everyday Fiqh. Now, in the last episode we talked about Mas' al-Khufain, or the wiping over the Khufain. We talked about its hukm, and we talked about the conditions. And inshallah ta'ala, I have a challenge for you. Without going back to the other class, or the other episode, see if you can write down those three conditions, or those conditions, as to what makes it permissible to wipe over the Khufain. Inshallah ta'ala, it's just a challenge. See who can do it. Inshallah ta'ala, and we'll discuss it below. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the time period, I guess we can say, for the wiping over the Khufain. Tayyib. The first thing I want to mention is that we need to differentiate between the wiping of the Khufain for the person that is a resident and that time period for the traveler. A lot of you know that as far as the resident, meaning the person that's not traveling, the person that has an iqama where they're at, meaning that they reside there, then this person يمسح المقيم يوما وليلة, meaning that they can wipe over their Khufain after they put them on, after completing their tahara, for a day and a night, for one day and one night. Tayyib. And as far as the traveler, then they have 3 days and 3 nights, or 3 days and their nights. Tayyib. Now, there are conditions to this wiping over the Khufain for the traveler. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll get to that. We don't just say just because a person is traveling they can wipe over the Khufain for 3 days and 3 nights. No. There are conditions, and from them is that it can't be for a situation of ma'asi or disobedience. We can't be traveling to go to a bar, or traveling to go to a club, or whatever, or for issues of zina and things along these sorts. But we'll get to all of that, the ahkam surrounding traveling, and what allows us certain privileges and what keeps us from getting certain privileges. But I just wanted to mention that because a lot of times we find that people, when they talk about traveling, whether they're talking about shortening the salah, combining the salah, wiping over the Khufain, things along these sorts, they leave it open. And a lot of people think, okay, regardless, it's permissible for me to wipe over during this situation, or for me to combine during this situation, or for me to shorten during this situation because of the fact that I'm traveling. That exception isn't just open-ended. And we need to keep this in mind. Inshallah ta'ala, like we said, or like I said a minute ago, we'll get to that when we get into the ahkam surrounding traveling. But know that for a person that can wipe over when they're traveling, then this person has 3 days and 3 nights, or 3 days and their nights. Tayyib? Jayyid. The next thing we want to mention, we talked about the time period that a person can wipe over. For the muqim, or the muqim again is the person that is a resident, and we have al-musafir, and this is the person that is a traveler. Now we talk about when does the period of wiping start. And you're going to find a lot of differences of opinion from amongst the different madhahib and the different ulama. But the position that the Shaykh brings here is that it's after you've put the Khufain on. Tayyib. It's not from the time that you wore the Khufain, but it's from the time that after you put them on and then you broke your wudu. This is the time in which your wiping period starts. So it's not from the time you actually put the Khufain on, and it's not from the time for the first time that you actually wiped over your Khufain. Tayyib. But it's from the time in which you've put the Khufain on and then you broke your wudu. Because listen, what if we get to the situation in these days and times? Sometimes people make their salah the way they're supposed to, sometimes they don't. So say somebody gets up for Fajr, they wash their feet, and they go to work. Some people, and it's not permissible to do it, but some people when they go to work, they come back and they make all their salah at nighttime. So this person, they're not going to wipe over the Khufain. You understand? They're not going to do it because they're not praying. So do we tell them, okay, you put them on for Fajr, but you're not going to wipe over them till after Isha? Do we tell them, okay, it begins with when you started wiping over? So now their day and night starts at Isha? No. Their day and night starts after they put their Khufain on. They were in wudu, they had tahara, or even the ghusl. Either way, they had tahara, they had a state of purification. And once they broke their wudu, once they broke their wudu or broke their tahara, then this is when the wiping period starts. So it's not once you put your Khufain on, which you're going to find some people say that this is when. You're going to find some people say that no, it's actually after the first time or the first time you wipe over them, which has its problems with it. But this is another opinion. But the opinion that seems to be the strongest is that it's after you've put your Khufain on and once you break your tahara, your purification, this is when the wiping period actually starts. Tayyib. So we talked about so far, we've talked about the time period of the wiping for the muqim and the musafir, the resident and the traveler. And we talked about when the period starts, when the wiping period starts or begins. Now we want to talk about the issue of, we said that for the resident or the muqim, and write these words down because these are good words to know. And I know this is an Arabic class, but there's nothing wrong with increasing in our vocabulary. So the muqim, this is an individual that is a resident. Tayyib. Now, let's say someone started off their wiping and they were a resident. And they have a day and a night. And during that time period, they travel. Do we tell them, okay, because you're traveling now, you start with 3 days and 3 nights? Actually, the way that this is resolved, because now they're in between two things. They were they were a resident, muqim, and then they were a musafir, or a traveler. So, if they were a muqim the whole time, then they wipe the period of a muqim, which is a day and a night. If they were a traveler the whole time, then they wipe the wiping of the traveler, which is 3 days and 3 nights. But if they mix between them, they start off as a muqim and then they ended up traveling, then what do? Then they wipe the wiping of the muqim, the day and the night. And after that period is over, then they could take their Khufain off, wash their feet, and then they can start their 3 days if they're still on their traveling. Do you understand? But that initial period doesn't extend. If you understand where I'm coming from. So again, if they have the wiping period of the muqim all the way through, they do the muqim wiping. If they're a traveler all the way through from the beginning to the end, then they do the traveling. But if they mix between the two, then they do the wiping of the muqim. Just like if a person is traveling and they may have a day or two left. So the day before they travel, they go back home, they have to wash their feet, and they start their 3 days and 3 nights as a traveler. But then they get home. Do we tell them while you're home, you still complete those 3 days and 3 nights? No. That's when, if they still have time left within that night and the day, they continue their night and the day as a muqim. If not, then they wash their feet and they start again with their day and their night. So at any point in time, and I hope that wasn't confusing, but I'm going to try and tie it together. Again, we just said, if someone is a muqim, then they wipe the wiping of the muqim, a day and a night. If they start and end as that muqim. If they start and end as that musafir, that period, then it's 3 days and 3 nights. If they mix between the two, whether it's they start off this way and end that way, or they start off that way and end this way, then they only have the wiping of the muqim. طيب? So if it's any mix, then they go with the shorter of the two. And hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Now we talked about the period, the time period. We talked about when it starts. We talked about what to do if we mix between the two. And now we want to talk about the issue of what completes the period of wiping. Or when does it become batil? When can you no longer wipe over your Khufain? The first of these issues is بِخَلْعِهِمَا, meaning that when you take off the Khufain, when you take them off, you can't just put them back on and wipe over them. You have to go through washing your feet again. طيب? The second of these things that nullify nullify an individual's opportunity or right to wipe over the Khufain is the time period ending. That day and night is over for the muqim, and those 3 days and 3 nights are over for the musafir. Once that happens, then you have to take off your Khufain and wash your feet, and then you can put the Khufain on. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, and start your wiping time period all over again. And the last or the third of these things is مَا يُوجِبُ الْغُسْلِ, that which makes the ghusl wajib. And this is where we're going to end up today, inshallah ta'ala, knowing that if the ghusl, it becomes wajib on an individual, because one of those things, those mujibul ghusl that we talked about before, those things that make the ghusl an obligation, if one of them happens, then you no longer can wipe over your Khufain, but you have to take them off, make the ghusl, and then you can put your Khufain on and begin your wiping period all over again. طيب? So in this particular episode, we talked about the time period for the muqim and the musafir. We talked about when the time period starts and what happens if a person mixes between both situations of being a muqim and a musafir. And we talked about the issue of what nullifies an individual's opportunity or the ability to go ahead and wipe over the Khufain. And inshallah ta'ala, if you have any questions about any of these things, you can leave them below. And again, as usual, if you like these videos or you find them to be beneficial, share them with the rest of the brothers and sisters around the world. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll see you in the next episode. Jazakumullahu khair wa barakallahu feekum. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.